Discussing the science behind high performance for Australian rules football. We'll be going into an objective approach, how you can use subjective measures for those that don't have access to things like force plates, GPS, and using apps to track the weights lifted in your gym program, as well as going into the gold standard and what most AFL clubs are using to give you an insight. So if you're Australian rules footballer looking to play at the highest level, this will give you a bit of a taste of what it takes and what's involved. And then for strength and conditioning coaches or anyone working in support for athletes, I think you'll get a few tips and a bit of an insight into what's going on behind the walls of an Australian rules football club. So I'll get straight into it. I've sort of broken it into three key areas. That's work, response to the work, and then tracking performance, or i.e. output. So starting with the work, for Australian rules football, it's simple. You're looking at the distance that the athletes are covering. If you have GPS, a global tracking device, on which you'll see the athletes wear in a vest on around their scapula, around their middle of their back, and that tracks not only distance that they cover, like smartwatches, but also it's accurate in measuring how fast they run, so their max speed, the amount of accelerations, the amount of hits the body takes, so those deceleration actions, you change of direction, but also things like your sprint distance and high speed running as well, which we know takes a toll on the body. So looking at that over your training sessions, weeks, months over pre-season, and of course now what the output is like in the game to get an idea of how demanding the game was for that athlete. Then you can look at their tonnage, so the amount of work they did in the gym in a given session, just by multiplying your reps, sets, and the weight lifted on the bar for anything that's used with a barbell or a dumbbell. Or if it's a bodyweight exercise, you use your body weight, and that will give you your tonnage. And probably the third is more of a mental strain, so looking at time in meetings. As we know, for anyone that's working at 9 to 5, the difference between your energy and your concentration of training in the gym or going for a run after a day's work compared to the start of your day is a huge contrast from a performance point of view, but also level of motivation. And that comes down to mental energy, and it can be stimulating learning being in a meeting, but it does take away from us. So we've got to take that into account, the amount of time that's spent in team meetings, and that will vary from club to club. So they're probably the big three. Look at the distance running, because it's a running sport, measuring the weights in the gym, and having an idea about what your focus is in the weights room, and then time in meetings from a more mental point of view. Then we want to have, for an objective scientific approach, we want to see how the athletes are responding to the work that they're doing. So we can use things like wellness questionnaires for those that don't have access to force plates and heart rate variability. Just simply asking the athlete how they feel the next day, or during warm-up, how did they pull up from the previous session. You might use a questionnaire, a link, like I've used Google Forms in the past in high school setting and semi-professional setting, and it just has a list of things like mood, sleep, your motivation to train, fatigue, and muscle soreness. So those 5 areas, you might rate it at 10 being fantastic, the best I've ever felt, best night's sleep I've ever felt, and 0 being the worst. And then they rate that on a subjective scale. It doesn't take a lot of time, so it's not a big toll on the athletes, and it gives you some markers to be able to see how they're going. And then you can work out what their baseline is. So once you start to get a few weeks of the data, you can start to see how much variability is in the data. Are they tracking in the right direction? When you're going through high training loads, when you're expecting the soreness to be high, is it higher? And conversely, when you're going through lighter weeks and you're transitioning to in-season, where you want them to feel fresh and well recovered and sharp, we want to see those scores start to trend up. So that can be in a subjective way that you can do it. From an objective point of view, using heart rate variability, which is just measuring our heartbeat from beat to beat, and the variability between your peak heartbeats. And we want high variability in our heart rate beats. If we have low heart rate variability, either we're under fatigue, we're sick, or perhaps we're fighting a disease. So we want high heart rate variability, especially with elite athletes. But we can also see trends in the data, just like the wellness, but it's more of an objective measure. It'll give us a scientific and research proven way to work out how well the athletes are responding to the workload. And that's a really good response, not just looking at one particular area like a muscle group, but actually the whole body. So a nice holistic look. So heart rate variability is research proven. There's apps out there now. You can do it on your phone, using the camera on your phone and putting it on your fingertip. You can use devices like Course Sense at Elite HRV, which is a course that I've done, and they've got a small $200 unit that you can buy. So there's a lot of great content out there. You can also measure your HRV before doing a recovery process and then measure it after. But typically the way that we use it is more just first thing in the morning. So it's really reliable and the data is consistent rather than changing it up. So it's the first thing that the athletes do on perhaps a main training day, and that would just give feedback to the high performance team about how the athletes pulled up from, or how they're responding to the workload. And if you're seeing an athlete trending in the wrong direction, it allows to create a bit of a conversation and check in and see how their sleep, how their stress, and how they're feeling, they're handling the loads. So HRV can be fantastic. Using things like force plate testing could be another way. Using a counter movement jump, where you basically just got your hands on your hips, an athlete jumps as high as they can, all in one motion. And that gives us some good research into how well the body is recovered. As we know, when the body's fatigued, it doesn't produce explosive force rapidly that well. So being able to do it at high explosive activity. If you haven't got force plates, you could do like a broad jump. How far can an athlete jump, and keep a track on that? And you might do that once a month. So there's other ways that you can work around it. Force plates, very expensive, but you can hire them these days for a cheaper cost. Heart rate variability is very cheap. There's apps now. Like I said, you can do it on your phone. So really, I think most budgets should be able to afford that. So that's how we work out the response of how the athlete's responding to the workload. Then you've got your output. And arguably, this is probably one of the more important things in high performance sport. How well are the athletes performing in the gym? How engaged are they in meetings and from a technical point of view? How well are they training? And ultimately, how well are they performing on game day? An athlete, especially the mature athletes, have been in the system for a long time, and something to take into account, their HRV may be trending down, their performance in the gym may be trending down, how they're feeling isn't at an all-time high, and they're still performing on game day. They've found other strategies to be able to get themselves up. Potentially that isn't going to be sustainable. So only having game day performance isn't your best measure. But if we're finding trends of what's working well for that athlete, and they're consistently producing high performance, and they're performing really, really well, and they're feeling good, their HRV is in a good spot, their wellness questionnaires in a great spot, they're lifting well, they're continually to work on their craft, then that's nice icing on the cake, because it's going to be sustainable, there's longevity there, there's development there, and they're performing on a weekly basis. So you can't ignore game day performance, that's for sure. But they're probably the three main ones. So how well are they for football? How well are they lifting in the gym? Are their lifts still tracking in the right direction? We know it's a long competitive season. So being April now, we want to make sure we're still lifting heavy, we're still lifting explosive. So we're going to be great at the pointy end of the season. So we don't want them dropping. We want to make sure our main training session of the week is at a high intensity. So look at how fast they're running with the GPS, what their work rate's like in the drills, what the coaches are seeing in terms of their training intensity. And then we want to ultimately see how they're performing week after week. And you can use those measures to, like I said, define trends to what works well for that athlete, because everyone's a little bit different. So they're the big ones. Have an objective approach to the workload, have an objective approach to the response to the workload, and then ultimately what their output is like. In terms of this week for the podcast, we've got the episode that I'm interviewing with Scott Salwazer last Friday. So that is going to be released this Wednesday. We talk about agility training for team-based athletes. So make sure to tune in for that one. And then Julian Jones this Thursday at 11 a.m. I've got a live interview with him, who's got an extensive background in track and field. So really looking forward to catching up with Julian. And then the bite-sized episode for this week will be with Tim Parham, who's head of medicine at Adelaide Crows. He's worked across numerous elite sports. So that's a 10-minute clip from that episode that I did over a year ago. If you enjoyed that episode with Tim, make sure to listen to the full episode by searching for his name in your favorite podcast directory, and that episode will pop up. Shout out to the Blood Flow Restriction podcast. I just listened to the exercise selection using Dr. Mike Israel. His stimulus to fatigue ratio is highly effective for strength and conditioning coaches. So if you haven't listened to that episode, even if you're not interested in BFR training and you just want to work on your programming point of view, I absolutely love that episode. So check it out. It's probably more towards your strength and hypertrophy for those in rehab because they're applying it using a blood flow restriction cuffs. However, you can apply the model, the stimulus to fatigue ratio to any training focus or adaptation that you're going for. So check out the blood flow restriction podcast. Love that episode. And it's definitely something I've subscribed to and will continue to listen to because there's great content coming out from there. So that's my shout out for the week. And then that's it for this week. So remember, if you love this content, to subscribe and like this episode, share it with someone who you think would enjoy the show. And if you're interested for more information or you want to join our academy, head over to propellicaproacademy.com.au. It's only $20 a month and you get access to all the presentations that we've hosted over the last few years, as well as a discussion forum to engage with our community and monthly live coaching calls. So if that interests you, you can direct message me for more information on our socials or email me at jack@propellicapro.com. Thanks for